So this is what the final product looked like. Nathan took the part finish crown home and did the last couple of portions of the profile just with a dado stack on the table saw and a bit of sandpaper to round them over. Of course, we could have done the entire profile with the knives, but since it was such a short run, it would have taken longer probably to grind the knives than it would be just to finish them up on the table saw. So that was a fun little job, and even though I think most people will probably be buying their own knives, so the majority of the standard profiles, I wanted to show that just to give you a sense of the flexibility that this high-speed steel tooling has. I think if you end up doing this a lot, and some people do this fairly regularly, some people have it as a fairly significant corner of their business, I think you probably want to consider upgrading to something a little more sophisticated. We did it all with very simple tooling, very simple machinery, and I think you can get away with that. But if you need to be a little more efficient, you could consider upgrading to something like this. This is a profile grinder. This is made in Quebec by Veal. It's probably a few $100s on the used market, maybe 500 new. I'm not sure. It simplifies the process. Makes it a little easier to be consistent, and it's probably a little faster in the end once you get good at it. It'll all depend on how much you end up doing. But with this type of tooling, the option's there. So let's talk a bit more now about the machinery. Okay, so this is my small shaper. It happens to be a Wadkin Bursgren 2 horsepower 3-phase shaper. It doesn't really matter what you'll find a lot of in the used market, especially Ontario, which is probably what I'm most familiar with, is a machine generally of this size and caliber. And I think this is a fair. There will be exceptions to all this, but very generally, I think this is sort of what you'll find with a North American or even an older European shaper of this size. This one's from the 1950s, and the great thing about them, they're well made and can still be very functional even today. But the big thing is, we're talking a lot about cost, and you can go out and you can buy a $25,000, $35,000 shaper, and if you have one of those, you probably wouldn't be watching these videos. So the idea is that they are and can be cost effective in a small shop. So I think we're talking about the used market, so you can get a quality machine without too much expense. There's always people out there that get amazing deals. There's always somebody out there that'll find a Rolls Royce for $100. But I think generally, when this size of machine in good working order, in this part of Canada anyway, I think it's safe to say that this is in the sort of the $300 to $700 range. When you get this machine, though, the odds are pretty good. It will come with relatively inadequate guarding. As you see here, the cutter head's completely exposed in the front in the opening of the fence, and is completely exposed back here. And also you'll end up with what is considered today to be relatively inadequate dust collection. The nice thing is, if you want, you can go and you can buy an aftermarket fence system for a lot of money, and it'll be wonderful. They're quite adaptable. They're easy to modify for whatever table you have. So that's possible. But it's also not terribly expensive or time consuming to build something that in the shop that will work fairly well. I'm in the middle of rebuilding all of mine now, so they aren't entirely intact right now. But here's the guts of one of them. That's just scrap pieces of plywood. The cutter head is completely enclosed. There's a 4-inch dust collection port, and I have another piece that clamps onto the fence right here that completely encloses it. Makes for great dust collection. And of course, if you're absent-minded and go like this, your hand's not going to end up in the cutter head. A few modifications that I'm going to make for this, and there are millions of strategies out there you can find online for how to do this. I'm going to put some rare earth magnets in the bottom so it stays put. It hasn't moved, but I'd like it to be a little bit more rigid. I also have for this what's called a breakthrough fence. I'm not going to get into all those details. These are the things that you should learn when you know before you start using a shaper too much. But a breakthrough fence essentially gives you the equivalent of something like a zero clearance insert. People are used to that on the table saw. You put a blank insert in there, and then you raise the blade up through it. Gives you zero clearance insert. Great dust collection, safe, the whole works. The same principle is used on a lot of spindle molders, a lot of shapers, and that you have a fence here, and you have a replaceable insert in the middle, and you put your cutter head in, you set it to the height you want it, and then you push it back in the rotating knives, and you end up with just as much knife protruding as you want, and it's very safe, great dust collection. The whole cutter head is exposed from the front, and then something like this would, is covered in the front, and then of course something like this would have the whole thing covered in the top and back and sides as well. I'll put a link down below to a great video for that from a college in England that shows you how to do that. So anyway, and then all of these things that I have done for this machine are all built with shop-made scraps, and so it's not terribly expensive. Except of course I had to purchase that, but that's no big deal. I would look around. I'm going to modify all of mine a fair amount now that I've used them for a couple of years. But anyway, the take-home message is you get a machine at a decent price. You know, it's not prohibitively expensive on the used market. We've talked about the tooling now. The tooling isn't necessarily ridiculously expensive. And to upgrade this to something that's, you know, more modern in terms of standards for safety and dust collection is not really a big deal either. So so all in, you're not. It's certainly not as expensive to get set up for properly and safely using a shaper in a small shop as a lot of people think. Now, people laugh at me. People who are familiar with shapers are laughing at me, I'm sure. One of the great things about shapers, and of course you can do this with table saws and router tables too, is the option to using a power feeder. Power feeders are great in a lot of ways, not just because they keep your hands away from the cutter head by feeding the stock through for you. This particular power feeder is ridiculously oversized for this shaper. I have a much smaller 3-wheeled one, but it's 600 volt 3-phase, and I'm not set up for that yet. Anyway, this works perfectly fine, but it's I think a lot of people would say it's a little oversized for this machine. But it's a great safety aid. It's a great system for improving the quality of the cut and finish as well. So, you know, you can put them on a router table as well. But you know, with the big heavy tops like this, it's easier to put them on a spindle molder. I chose, because this one's so large, I chose to add a little extension over here to mount the mast on. But most tables are large enough. You don't have to do that. Anyway, so that wraps it up for this little video series. If you are thinking about adding a shaper to your shop, I hope this helps dispel some of the common myths anyway about shapers. I can't stress enough that you know, in the proper hands with proper techniques, proper tooling and guarding, there's no reason to think that they're any more dangerous than any other machine in the shop. But really, it's same as with any other machine. You have to educate yourself. So before you get into the whole shaper world, you know, take a course if you can. I'm going to add some links down below to some great resources, great reading material, some courses, and some other videos that talk about how to use a shaper. You know, I think when you get into it, you'll find it a tremendous, cost-effective tool that opens a lot of doors to your business model, and you know, I think it'll be something that you really come to enjoy. So. Thanks for watching. Go ahead, fire off any questions you may have, and as always, play safe.